Hey y'all, another fun episode.
We were talking, and I was like the Spider-Man meme. I was pointing at Mike. I didn't know if he was going or if I was going, but either way, I'm rolling. It's Friday, whatever it is, November 21st, and I'm sporting my F1 hat. I'm not an F1 fanboy, but it's going down this weekend in Vegas, so I figure why not? Anyways, been a lot going on. I wish that it was not as busy and chaotic. When we started doing this podcast, 2 years ago, when we first just kicked it off, we kind of thought for a minute, like, what are we going to keep talking about? And are we going to be able to make content every single week and be able to have a discussion about things and keep it fresh? Well, as it turns out, we have a hard time fitting in everything that we want to talk about in 45 minutes or an hour. And so a lot of stuff happening daily. Mike and I, we sit back and as we work every single day, wake up, talk to agents, look at distribution, look at our sales, look at our goals, metrics with carriers, our quality, our compliance, and everything happening. I mean, daily things are popping off. And I wish I could say that this week there were more positive things happening, but it's just more of the same, y'all. It is continuing. And actually, one of my calls that I was on earlier this morning, I said, I keep thinking that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I keep thinking that we're at the end of the quote unquote correction, that we're at the tail end of it, that the bad part's over, and that now we're, back on the upward trajectory. I keep telling myself that. And we are not, my friends. So sadly.
Yeah, just, I feel like we're, as our dad used to say, beating a dead horse on the podcast sometimes week over week, but it just seems like things continue to shift and things continue to emerge. And so we hope that by talking about some of the things at a macro level and some insider information, it kind of helps everybody, right? CMS regulators, carriers, brokers. Ultimately, I care most about the brokers, right? How do we navigate this? How do we do more? But hopefully we trigger conversations amongst all groups.
And one of the biggest concepts that I talk to people about, I have been lately getting more into, which you'll appreciate this and get a chuckle out of, mentoring and helping a lot more young people, because
I like to do that. And
well, I like to do that too. I've been in the business a little bit longer than you. And so I hit my threshold of burnout of like telling people what they should do and coaching them and have them never listening to me. And it burns you out after a while. You're like, hey, I want to get some life advice from you. And you're like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very sure. Okay. And you give them advice and they're like, and I'm going to do exactly the opposite of that, So, but
you're
no.
Like, that wasn't the advice I wanted. I wanted you to tell me some easy magic tricks.
I wanted to cut some corners and do this easy. No, but like when I talk to these young people and I really say like how I've been successful in the business and in the industry, it really starts with the consumer, the people that you're serving and helping. And it's not BS. When I was an agent, all I could think about is if I want to be successful, I have to be the best agent out there. I have to do the best job with my consumer. I need to understand what they need. I need to save them money if that's their objective. I need to get them care where they want to access it. I need to solve the problem and be the best at it. And if you are the best, like that cream, it just rises to the top. Like all the other problems solve themselves eventually over time. And so I've been telling everybody, ultimately we care about the consumers and the people that the agents are serving, and we care about the agent community. And those are the people that we really care about. And if we do a phenomenal job helping the consumers and helping our agents, everything else is going to take care of itself. And, that is our focus and that's our core. And it's rough. And more, as I've been joking about with Mike, I'm a true geek and a nerd when it comes to things about the industry and studying it and insurance and video games and cultural. I'm a self-proclaimed nerd, and it's fine. And I was just thinking about Fallout, like the game and the TV show, which is, by the way, awesome on Amazon.
We were just talking about that with the guys.
I'm very excited for Fallout, the new season to come out. It is awesome. And I just think of like, I'm rolling around the Wasteland right now like the ghoul, just effing people up, taking names, and it is a wasteland out there. But I don't know. It seems like we're getting a lot of victories out there in the wasteland, but that's just kind of like the state of the industry right now.
That's funny you said that, because I was just talking to our team leads over there, and I said, look, guys, the industry right now and over OEP is its Mad Max Fury Road, right?
We could say Book of Eli.
Yeah, and we're in the wasteland post-apocalypse. However, we're like this. We're the group that has the resources. We're the group that is doing okay, and we're weathering the wasteland better, and we're out there collecting the other survivors out in the wasteland right now. And we're gonna win in the wasteland, right? Or we're the ones in the vault.
See, we think the same. You thought Mad Max, I thought Fallout. Yeah, very close, right?
Well, it does feel like that, and we'll kind of outlay why and where we kind of see things heading and some of the new whispers and trends in the industry. But one of the things that I'm a little bit frustrated with is I thought by this point CMS and the carriers and the broker community, we would have been on a little bit more of the same page by now. And it seems like everybody is just, those three groups, it's what's in it for them.
Look, we talk about everybody's getting theirs right now. Like, look, it's so fragmented, the entire industry. Look, the agent is getting theirs wherever they can right now. The carriers, they're getting theirs, right? Like, meaning, like, I got to hit, like, my EPS. I got, like, my earnings call that's coming up. I got to hit my numbers. I'm going to do whatever it takes savagely, no matter what. And honestly, from our perspective, it's getting more and more difficult to defend some of the actions of the carriers, right? Like when you hear the sentiment of the average consumer who's talking about the evil insurance companies and they're all about the bottom line and they're, doing all these mechanisms and they're denying care and prior auths and X and Y and Z and, and I'm like, hey, hold on, they're not the bad guys. And we've done a lot of work in the industry to defend, in the public forum and town square, so to speak, a lot of the carriers and what they're really up to. And then it's getting more and more difficult for the average broker or entity to continue to provide them cover with a lot of their activities, right? Like everybody's getting theirs. These carriers, they've demonstrated that there's no limit or length in which they'll go to make things work. And I'm not saying just one particular carrier, it's across the board in the industry. I was joking with an agent the other day and I said, you don't even know what it's like right now. They don't just, we talk about putting the Triscuit cracker in your stomach. They don't just not have it. They go reach into your mouth, into your stomach, and rip the Triscuit cracker out of your stomach. They are really savage right now. So it's like CMS seems to have like their agenda items right now, which agent compensation is not one of them. Mm-hmm. And I hate to tell you all that, but it's not hot on their list right now. They're doing other things. They're getting theirs. Carriers are getting theirs right now. And so everyone's just completely fragmented and broken, doing their own thing, and there's no cohesion from the top down in the entire industry right now.
Yeah, I think, the analogy of the wasteland, and I just sit and go, some of this has got to be, strategic. You have to wonder what the intended and unintended effects of some of these things are.
Yeah.
And, maybe we can address each one of those things right now. Let's, talking about CMS, it seems like a lot of these state DOIs have kind of stepped up, and the broker community's been really celebrating that as kind of a step in the right direction, with them issuing bulletins or even cease and desist to some of these carriers. And just like a lot of times, I think those insurance carriers are like, that's nice. Toss it right in the wastebasket. And they're like, well, I'm not going to do that or modify any changes until I absolutely have to.
Right.
And, CMS seems to have their agenda, which is calling out the fraud, waste, and abuse. And they just had the House Ways and Means Committee, Senate, the Ways and Means Committee meeting about ACA. Last week. They rooted out a bunch of fraud and kind of named names. And it seems like CMS is more concerned with playing aggressive, hard-nosed cop right now on everything than they are actually trying to make things better for the consumer, at least at the current time being, or solve some of the issues that are affecting healthcare in the country. And the thing that really frustrates us in the industry right now is you have this dichotomy of thought right now in the industry where the insurance carriers are so heavily vilified about how they've been profiteering over the past 15 years. Yeah. Yes, just like all of these big industries, like we talked about, tech and literally everything over the past 15 years. and how they've just been making money hand over fist for this time. But now, at this current environment, both on the ACA and Medicare front, these carriers are not making money. They're losing money, and they're trying to cut everything possible, all these cost-cutting mechanisms. So you have literally this dichotomy of situations right here that we keep talking about. And you're like, well, I mean, maybe the insurance carriers were profiting money hand over fist, but it's not right now. And right now there's a lot of problems because they're trying to get back to profitability and cutting things like crazy. And ultimately it's the consumers who are being affected.
Yeah, I agree. And like everything, we've talked about vertical integration a lot over the years. And look, every industry does it. Oil companies do it. It happens in the energy sector. It happens in the financial sector. It happens in every sector of the economy. But that's the other thing is, look, let's not pretend like insurance carriers haven't been making grip loads of monies over the last decade. They have, but like what they do is frequently they're purchasing other assets in their balance sheet. They go through their earnings call, and instead of posting or showing profitability, they're taking that cash and they're buying other assets, right? And so it's like they've had years of tons of profitability, but they've chosen to continue to grow their underlying asset class and all these other components that they own. And so now if you hit this inflection point in a year or two where it's leaner and they're like, oh, we just don't have any money, we can't do it. But they have a crap load of other assets, and so that kind of is frustrating because anybody who's, pays attention and follows that understands that kind of strategy. And of course, there's the argument that, well, yeah, those acquisitions, though, continue to make things more efficient and lower costs and X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, that did it, because those moves are the exact moves that are supposed to get you to where you can be more efficient and thrive and still be profitable in a tough environment. So there's that kind of counter to it as well. But one of the other things that you mentioned before we pivot completely to ACA, because I want to talk about that, is just what we don't want. Like, we talk about what's going to be the consequence, the downstream effect, the ripple effect of all these things that are happening. And we've said it many times. I am not typically a person, just from a personal perspective, where I want to welcome more government regulation. I just think I more frequently than not want to think that there's more innovative ways that the private market and smart people can figure out solutions than asking for government regulation. And one of the things that really sucks is the more and more that we continue on for a longer period of time and having more and more plans becoming non-commissionable and more things suppressed and more activities that the carriers continue to do to kind of tweak and refine. I want the perfect amount of applications, only up to this 100% threshold, but in this county, but not in that area. The more that they continue to kind of make a case for the unfair trade practices, then the more and more it's going to welcome more regulation. And that's the one thing that I'm lamenting right now, because I just see it ahead, is could we ever get to a point where certain states are going to say, listen, CMS, you were the regulatory body for all this stuff. You've been asleep at the wheel. You haven't done this. I'm the insurance commissioner here in my particular state. We're going to have this requirement, X, Y, or Z. And you might start to see insurance in states and insurance departments, just like when you file a med sup product and you have to do it on a state-by-state basis, we might see more intervention and more pushback from states on products, which I could definitely see in the roadmap. I don't want more regulation, but like I said, I think at some point that might have to happen. And like I said, even with this, more and more commissioners getting on board with fair trade practices and putting up more bulletins, if there's more actionable steps, it's just going to trigger more downstream actions.
Well, so. Yeah, I mean, let's get a little bit more granular, because what Dan's talking about is what is going to be the effect of all the things and all these different levers and cost controlling mechanisms that the carriers are pulling on right now. And it seems like all the carriers it's just a race to the bottom, right? Like, one carrier does something egregious to the industry and manipulating the market, and then the other carriers go, oh, well, they did that. Well, now let's do this. And so
it is. I always joke, well, like Delta, we're not as shitty as Southwest. That's our slogan. All we have to be is slightly better than American Airlines or Southwest, and as long as we're slightly better, we'll get the business.
Yeah, well, we're the luxury airline because our seats are 1 inch larger and
right.
yeah.
We missed less connections. So it's kind of like, I feel the same way in the industry. And I appreciate you saying that, the race to the bottom, because it's almost like we don't have to be good anymore. We don't have to achieve greatness. We don't have to do a wonderful job. We just have to be less shitty than everybody else.
And you know, Dan and I had a particular hard week. We had multiple calls with carrier people, and there are things happening in the industry that we can't specifically say and call out right now, but we know that are happening that are going to cause some big waves in the coming weeks and months.
Yep.
That are about to drop. And each carrier, there's, you know, different carriers have different things that they're going to be doing, and it's going to cause some big disruption. And so some of you guys out there might be thinking, oh, well, it's not that bad. You know, there's carrier X that's doing a really good job in taking business and this and that and that. And there's carrier this that's doing a pretty good job. I would just say, you know, hold the phone there, because there's going to be some anticipated news that's going to change some things. And what I think is going to happen, and what we're seeing more suppressions, we're seeing more plans go non-commissionable, and there's whispers and rumoring of things that they can do where carriers are going to start doing agent level suppression, where you're telling me that you're going to identify and single out an agent that's verifiably enrolling people in a plan that you filed, and they're loading too many people in it for some reason that you don't like, and then you're going to go shut off that individual agent's access to do it.
And look, and that's my call to regulators and the DOI and everybody. And I say, look, if I got an insurance agent who is ethical, who is good, there's no issues with it, and basically, you know, agent meets with consumer at the kitchen table, says, hey, let's look at options available to you as a consumer to buy an insurance product. It looks like this is a great one. And because that agent is doing his or her job and enrolling consumers into it with a compliant presentation and using valid election codes and doing everything that they should to follow the rules, but you're the carrier and you just don't like the volume because you're going to penalize the agent? It's wild. And
yeah.
we see some of that happening on the roadmap, you know, over this next year.
Yeah, and it really is irksome of what's evolved, because when we came up in this industry, you get beaten over the head with compliance and steering, right? Steering has always been one of the main things in the whole industry, and this level of fairness, especially in the Medicare Advantage environment. That's why commissions are all the same. That's why there's been so much consternation over co-op dollars and buying the business, and yet we're doing extreme amounts of steering in the opposite direction at a national level, and all of these carriers are participating in it. And now you're talking about doing it on a granular level of an agent basis. And it's multiple carriers talking about that. And they're like, well, and they veil it, they wrap it in this, well, we're worried about future CTMs or future complaints on this. So we're going to shut off that person's ability or this entity's ability to do that because we think that maybe in the future there's some indicators that we don't like. And you are going to this is what's happening right now as of this part of AEP. We've got 2.5 weeks left, and we've got the big last week where everything it's as good as the first week. But here's what's emerging. The carriers that have wanted some business, that we're in a somewhat growth mindset.
And by it's multiple carriers.
Yes,
Like
this is
carriers,
no
plural.
no one think I'm talking about this anybody
and by
in
the way,
specific.
it doesn't matter when this episode drops next week. I already know I'm going to get texts and phone calls from carriers.
And you guys will all know who and what and changes and all this. But you'll see the carriers that were in a semi-growth mindset are going to have taken on as much growth as they already want.
We checked that box. We already hit our goal, or we surpassed it.
Because we were the ones that were out there kind of saying, well, actually, we want to grow a little bit here and there and in these circumstances. And they've grown to the levels that they wanted to or far surpassed that already at this point in AEP. And then you have the next tier of carriers below that were like, well, we kind of situationally wanted to grow in these different areas, or despite all of this, the industry trends earlier in the year, we still didn't realize that we were going to be the default mechanism to pick up all of this shift or all of this business in the industry. And they're going to wake up counting their enrollments and go, oh my gosh, we accidentally took on way too much more membership than we thought.
Yep.
And those carriers are all going to be in a really bad spot. And then you had the bottom tier carriers that were like, hey, we're just going to come out and say this, pretty much don't write us,
Well, but to make it worse, to what we're saying, to compound, like we've talked about before, though, then you have the bottom tier carriers, the little smaller local ones, and other people who we always joke and go like, if these other people couldn't make it work, how are you going to make it work? But they think that they are, and they're just very behind the curve. And we've talked about this. We think that there's many smaller local carriers that still thought that they finally like, hey, guess what? We've been trying to get business for 5 years, and our time's finally come. We're getting all this business. All right, we're having a good year. And they just don't realize the position that they're in. And I think throughout the year, too, you're going to have more of these smaller carriers with complete insolvency issues. And, they are taking business now, but they're going to completely close the doors to taking business. And when they do those moves in a local marketplace, it's just going to exacerbate and compound the problem with the nationals, too. Because if you're in a county or a zip code or a state where a local or a regional is winning right now, whether it's beginning of OEP, right after OEP, whatever that may be, when they finally realize the position they're in and they shut off enrollments, it just shifts all that business to a national who was still accepting enrollments, paying commissions, available to market, and then they're going to, as another chain reaction to that, just shut it down.
Yeah, and so what's really emerging, guys, is we know there are more suppressions and non-commissionable plans coming from
multiple carriers.
From multiple carriers. It's going to further eliminate the availability. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to roll into OEP, where there's still millions of people that need and want help because the industry's been so disruptive. And, we're hearing from consumers left and right how confused they are, how much help they need. We just SAR'd 10% of the entire industry. It's not able to all have happened during this annual enrollment. And we're going to roll into OEP thinking, hey, it's okay. This is the cleanup phase. This is where we can continue to do work. And us as an industry or an agency for the past 3 years have actually done more business in OEP than even AEP, annual enrollment. And what you're going to emerge is you're going to go, hold on. Nobody wants the business. There's nobody nationwide that wants to take this. 50% of all plans nationwide are suppressed and non-commissionable. What are all these seniors supposed to do? It's like the buckets are all full and there's nowhere for the water to go anymore.
Well, and that's the issue that we're having. We're for you people who are listening, we have kind of different segments of listeners. We have people in the industry who are agents. We have people who are, carriers, people at CMS, people at tech platforms, whatever it may be. But we're not aligned because, look, the way that the industry has worked in distribution, whether it's us as a wholesaler, FMO distribution, whether it's an agent who sells a product, the revenue comes and you grow your business when you write the policy, right? And so that's the rub right now, is that if you're an agent listening, you want to go sell insurance products to therefore go serve the consumer and go make a commission. But the problem is the carriers are going, they're making it as difficult as possible right now, saying, actually, just kidding, we don't want you to sell. So we're at an impasse here because they don't want you to go do that, many of them right now. But yet, here you are, and your job is, hey, I'm an independent insurance agent. I help consumers with their Medicare and health insurance, so let me help you with your Medicare. Joke's on you, I can't do that, right? And so that's the other thing is now, we even had agents, we have agents blowing us up every day about their Sunfire platform, and they're asking, well, why is this plan not available? I can't see it in there. What on the daily, it's fluctuating and changing what plans are showing available in there for the agents. And they come to us and we're like, look, it's not us. Like we have you with that carrier, RTS, all the states. I don't know why that's not showing up in your Sunfire. It's not us. And you're just getting more and more carriers that are feeding those suppressions and non-commissionables to Sunfire, and they're just dropping off constantly. And so it's, again, what do you do as an agent when you're in a marketplace and you got consumers that want help and you go, I don't know, look, tough shit. Either I can enroll you in one of these handful of plans that as a broker have that are available to me to offer to you, or I don't know, call Medicare, call SHIP, because apparently, and that's the other thing. So is it really going to solve it? Because then they can call a SHIP officer and then they're going to enroll them in the plan anyway.
Or, or hey, go stumble your way around Medicare.gov and see if you can find, see if you can self-enroll yourself if a plan's available there. It's just, it's bad everywhere. And so when we talk about it being a wasteland where it's going to be, Mad Max or Fallout, whatever, this post-apocalyptic, the resources are drying up. And if you haven't noticed, co-op money, marketing dollars has basically been non-existent, and it's going to basically go to almost not existing in the industry at all.
Well, and so think about that. Like, to your point, why did they do co-op dollars?
We got growth mechanisms and pay for growth, and
wanted
attract
a growth mechanism to put out there, whether it's to you at the agent level, whether it's to a distributor, whether it's to anybody. They wanted to grease the slicks, like grease the wheels a little bit. We want to get, we got to prime the pump. We got to get more out in the marketplace to generate more sales and more revenue. And it's like, look, that's not the mode they're in. They don't want to go pay for the business and go get theirs, because they're already, like, if they're taking business at all, period, it's kind of like any carrier that's taking any business is sitting back in the catbird nest right now going, we're still paying, so we're great. I mean, if you think that they need to go juice it up and give you extra incentives to go do so, you're wrong.
Well, here's the problem, and we'll talk about that selfishly on the FMO distribution side of things, is co-op money, and this is for agents too, over the past 10 years has essentially acted as a default buffer zone or bonus money to actually make some of the dollars and economics that weren't so great working. Because, where our overrides as an FMO, they haven't changed in, 10, 12 years?
Yeah.
You look at how costs have increased over the past 10 or 12 years and so co-op dollars to distribution and agents has essentially functioned as a, make-up payments or...
Well, yeah, and on the agent side, they had FMV that was increasing, right? So an agent had that FMV like annually that pretty much for the last 10 years increases, right?
Well, not only that, but almost all the carriers had some sort of marketing dollars or like reimbursements or the HRAs and things like that were acting like additional compensation in some form or fashion, or maybe not for that particular enrollment, but at least it was more dollars in the ecosystem for them to grow their business, right? Well, now that's all getting sucked entirely out of the whole industry, and you're living on, the dollars that were in the ecosystem 15 years ago, but now you're operating with costs that are, 2025 levels that we're all talking about, and you're going to see that trickle-down effect create a wasteland effect of starving out some of these agents and agencies that were on a tilt that needed that money, right? That was the difference between them folding up shop or going out of business. That was the difference between this, growing agency, making it work, paying their rent, being able to hire some people and not. And now that money is just going to be completely sucked out. So we talk about industries and everything's like the pendulum, right? It's always swinging, and it's swung past the point of correction right now in our industry to where we're on this back end side of things where you're going, wow, holy cow, we got to hopefully to start swinging back the other way, because we really need some wins if we want to be able to maintain some semblance of agent distribution over the next few years, because I still feel like agents are the most necessary part of the equation.
Well, and the other thing that I would just add to that, because I see this happening, I think that I am right 80-90% of the time when we talk about what's going to happen the next year, the next 2 years in the industry, whatever. I have a good track record, and as I've been thinking about it, and the carriers are thinking about all these ways that we can oh crap, our buckets are full. We have too much membership. How can we prevent, more membership? One of the things that is emerging, look, they've already done mechanisms of plan suppression, of non-commissionable, of, hey, this is the wrong selling of this plan type. We're going to not make things visible in enrollment systems. They're doing all these things, and now the insurance commissioners are popping off saying like, hey, these aren't good fair trade practices. My next thing that I think is happening, and I'm saying now, and it's not just one carrier, it's multiple carriers. If you're an agent out there, watch your back. The one thing that I'm really concerned about is protecting our agents, and especially the good ones. Look, we talk about the crappy agents all the time. If you're a crappy agent and you're listening to this podcast episode, if you're an agent who has been considering another industry, considering a career change, I would encourage you to go take this as a cue and go pursue that other career opportunity, because the industry is already saying, and look, there's no right to appoint. These insurance companies they're not required or obligated to appoint you to sell their products. We also saw that as a squelching mechanism. We had multiple carriers on the ACA side, which we'll talk about in a bit, and even on Medicare, they closed their blackout windows for onboarding, and some of them are even preventing new agent appointments. Because why? Because if you prevent new agent appointments and you don't allow more sellers, you reduce the amount of new sales volume that you're going to get. And so they're already suppressing or squelching new agents appointing with carriers. And the other thing that will happen is, I think, compliance. And I want insurance commissioners and regulators and people to be listening to this really closely, because I'm already seeing agents who are doing things very good, and there's ticky-tacky things that they do wrong. And we joke about, if you follow somebody for 20 miles driving behind them, you're going to find something that they didn't stop for a full 3 seconds. They didn't use a turn signal. They didn't use something minor. And I'm telling you, I think a lot of carriers are going to use compliance as a tool to hang their hat on to eliminate a lot of agents over this next year. As we get into OEP and we start looking at the sales volume from AEP, they're going to start axing a lot of agents and finding any reason, if they cough wrong, to get them out of the industry. And sometimes it's like, wait, you're going to get rid of this agent who sold 300 plans for you? Yes, we are getting rid of that high-producing agent even, because in some ways the agent community thinks that they're really valuable for selling more volume to the carrier, but the switch has flipped. And now even some of those good agents who are writing good business, I feel like very unfairly will be in some ways targeted this next year. And so I think that is a very unfair trade practice.
I'll give you an exact example of that. We had a situation where there was one of the carriers that had an outlier plan along Eastern Oregon where it was a good plan, right? It was the quote unquote best plan in the area. Well, the carrier,
it was the right fit for the consumer.
It was the right fit for the consumer.
Okay.
Well, the carrier made it suppressed and took it off at all digital enrollment platforms, but there was a couple of, they called them the mountain man agents, that they're like, all right, well, I'll go get faxes, I'll go get paper applications and sign these people up, and I'll fax them in, I'll jump through your extra hoop. And they did it. Those agents thought they were doing a good job, but they were actually named specifically as points of heartburn and called out in like a national level. Like, there was these couple agents that did this. And so you have this agent thinking they're doing a great job of providing a great product fit that's available legally and filed for their consumer. And the carrier's like, son of a gun, that guy figured out a way to, like, you know, make it happen. And now, and it was a negative, you know, and that's happening at scale. And what Dan's saying is, we talk about these levers. They're just all these levers that they're pulling on. And what we're saying is that agents and agencies and distribution are being systematically starved out of the industry right now, whether that be from a financial perspective or a compliance perspective or a frustration perspective of just so much, you know, change and turmoil, where agents just go, I'm tapping out.
And it all goes back to Dr. Oz taking office right at the beginning and saying, hey, you know what, I think we need less agents. It all, you know, goes back to that.
Yeah, and look, I agree with that and if we have time to talk about, you know, some of the statistics from the Ways and Mean Committee meeting, but you had all these agents, people getting an insurance license, and that, I don't know what the number is, but I would imagine probably 10x'd from 2018 to 2024 in the whole ecosystem, because they were writing ACA policies, or they were with this org that was doing them either right or wrong. And you had this proliferation of the call centers on the Medicare side, and this grow, and then dragging people in through the COVID years.
Well, look, we see it everywhere, right? In every industry. When mortgages were booming and we had like stated loans and everything, like tons of people were getting into the mortgage industry. Yep. And then when you when you have all these subsidies going into, you know, solar and energy, and then you have tons of solar bros, and like that segment really grows. And it's like any of these sectors within the economy where there's a lot of revenue and it's growing, it sucks in and it grows massively. And then there's a giant pullback, right, in those industries, whether it is mortgage, real estate, whether it's, you know, solar or utilities, or like our industry, insurance, and these subsidized products. So
Yeah, and so I'm not like, this isn't meant to be necessarily, hopefully at the end of this, like we'll always do, we'll put our positive spin on it. But if you're a good agent out there that's surviving, we still believe there are great, bright days ahead, and that the industry is going to get back to a really good, healthy. We can only say that for so many months and so many episodes.
So you know what I'm going to say? And you can call this episode that if you want. A push is a win. It's the thing I hate in casinos, and I'm telling you this. It's like, and I do love to play blackjack, and you go to the casino and, you go, like that, like, hey, that's the push, right? And they go, hey, push is a win. I'm like, screw you. If I didn't get any money, it's not a win. Mm-hmm. This push is not a win. But it feels like this year, if you're an agent who's still in the industry and you're not getting terminated and you're writing business, and if your revenue is the same or increased a little bit from last year, a push is a win this year.
Yeah,
is what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, and again, despite all that, and not to toot our own horn, but we're going to keep growing it like we are. We keep growing every year over year. I know that's not the same for all these businesses across the country, and I feel bad for a lot of them, but I definitely think that as the compression and contraction fully fleshes out, there are a lot of other FMOs and agencies and smaller agencies that are going to get just washed out of the industry, and they're just not going to be able to survive this wasteland type environment that we're talking about.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of the point. That's
the intended consequence, right? That's the intention. So maybe we talk about ACA for a little bit before we wrap. What do you think? You were a little more versed on that, finding you read the letter.
Yeah, look, I mean, ACA's going, and I think that for some agents, there hasn't been quite as catastrophic.
Hey, listen, I was just, maybe before, I think to set the table for it, there's always loud voices in the ACA who are talking about like, hey, we're helping the underserved and X and Y and Z. And you can only do that so much without, being such a hypocrite, because the reality is, like, when you read through like the fraud still, they're like, hey, we kind of had like a really good thing going here. We want to keep perpetuating this great kind of thing that we had going, and honestly, for the real actual individuals, like the real humans that we talk to on the phone and that our agents talk to at the kitchen table, the real people who exist with real social security numbers and real blood in their veins and go to get medical treatment, those people, it's not as savage as people thought it would be, like in this open enrollment period, because we're selling a ton, we're doing great, we're retaining our business. We're going to grow this open enrollment period. And, the biggest trend has been, of course, that those people, a lot of them, there was incentives with the silver loading, and those people are going more to bronze plans. And bronze plans all are now eligible for an HSA. So we're just seeing a shift from silver loading to bronze with an HSA, or we're seeing people going to STM plans, or we're seeing people going to Christian ministries, or, pre.
Or without.
Yeah, and things like that. But, I mean, it's not as bad as people were first saying, like the sky is falling, where some of the people who very selfishly are advocating for the enhanced subsidies, it's because their entire business was built on the enhanced subsidies. Like, they literally don't even have an underlying business without the enhanced subsidies. And so for me, I go, yeah, that's great. All that is really, what's up on the table is subsidies are going to continue. And what they're really talking about is, are we going back to the original Obamacare ACA prior to COVID, or are we going to keep the super inflated COVID ACA version of, Obamacare? And that's really what we're, in the very quick version, at odds with. And like I said, I don't think if you're really in the space, it's as bad as maybe purported. And before you talk, there's this, I'll give a shout out to this guy, Steve DeWeese. Steve, if you're listening, made a good post on LinkedIn the other day. He was talking about the fraud in the ACA and basically large agencies who were kind of getting into Health Sherpa, who were changing people's ethnicity to like Alaskan Eskimo or whatever, and then they'd go back a step and it would hard code in the system, and then that would automatically trigger that person for zero premium subsidies, and they were doing it at scale 600 or 1,000 times per month, and just doing that over and over and over. And there were even a lot of fraudulent policies of people who didn't even exist. And so then you had a fraudulent, not real person, or an illegal, or somebody that didn't even qualify for it, and then you're making them a Native American Alaskan Eskimo or whatever, qualifying them for zero and just rinsing and repeating and generating millions in revenue every single month over and over and over. And I kind of said, like, look, I haven't seen people in jail from stuff like that. Like, where is, like, it's not going to, like, nobody's in jail from it, though. The agency's still collecting money and all that kind of stuff. So where's the outrage?
Well, and they do detail out specifically some of those lawsuits, the cases in Florida, the $294 million one, the true coverage and enhanced health ones, you know, and you start adding those up, and, you know, they were doing all those things Dan just talked about, but they were also, you know, giving people $5 Visa cards to sign up for their ACA and go into homeless shelters and buying mortgage protection leads. And just, look, we've talked about it on this podcast for 2 years consistently. I'm so happy that all those people are getting their just desserts, and that, you know, go figure, you're committing fraud and abusing the system, and there's some sort of action, whether, you know, who knows if they'll end up in jail or whatever, or what scalp CMS actually ends up getting. But
I haven't seen the pounds of flesh.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and all that fraud, so you have a handful of bad actors and entities, and they are the ones that completely wreck it. You talk about the people who ruin it for everybody else. Well, that becomes, even in this Ways and Means Committee hearing, they start talking about brokers and agents and whatever. And it's like, come on, those aren't really brokers and agents. Those were human bodies that these fraudulent organizations had to get, you know, check the box and get a certification so they could enable the fraud. But those weren't actual agents and actual brokers.
Those are grifters. They're the same people that would spin up a thing and sell a copper something knee brace and fraud the system for charges.
Exactly, and commit the DME, durable medical equipment fraud and stuff like that. And so it's frustrating now that all brokers have been getting painted with that brush over the past couple of years. And a couple of interesting statistics that we've talked about before on this podcast is they talk about there were 12 million people on ACA plans in 2024 that filed zero medical claims. And that's statistically impossible, but when you look at the people that were fraudulently enrolled or misenrolled, that were signed up just to get a commission, and then the carriers are getting, you know, paid these subsidized amounts with zero claims, you can see how it becomes a problem. They talk about 6.4 million people being misenrolled, costing the taxpayers $27 billion. And then they also talked about,
it's okay, we can just print more.
Yeah, I guess that they still think that 2.3 million people that are currently enrolled are misreporting their income. And there are agents and entities that are like, well, just say you make this so you can get this subsidy. And I will say that with the current system, with the subsidies, the enhanced subsidies being not extended, it's the middle class people that are really getting screwed by this right now. It's the people that are reporting an AGI of $90,000 to $156,000 on their income.
Yep.
Their AGI, you know, their adjusted gross income, where all of a sudden their premiums are $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. And, you know, just like a lot of things in this country right now, it does suck because the middle class is just getting destroyed on some of those things where, cool, you know, if you were poor, you were getting the Medicaid and the subsidies anyway. And if you're still poor, you're still getting those things. But the people who are, you know, paying into the system now, they're the ones that are really disproportionately affected.
Well, it's like bracket creep, and those are going to be the people, if there's any segment that's uninsured, it's going to be them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's who is having a hard time with these current costs, because like we've been talking about, those premiums, when they don't have subsidies, are catastrophic in costs right now. And so those are the people that are right now having to be forced to go without, pick up a short-term plan, or just swallow it and somehow figure out a way to pay these really expensive premiums.
Or get these non-qualified kind of indemnity type medical products, you know, that aren't fully necessarily insured and have some loopholes and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen some of that as well. So, yeah. And they don't qualify for HSA when they get those. So it's tough.
Yeah, if you're a CMS regulator that happens to listen to this, all brokers are not created equal. And just because somebody picked up an insurance license to go, you know, be the mechanism to commit fraud somewhere over the past 4 or 5 years, those are not brokers, right? Those are not agents. Those are not the people who have done a good job, that want to build a career on helping people that are serving a very high need. And again, the frustrating thing for all of this is I think agents have never been needed now more than ever. You know, we've got this, we always reference this Medicare group that we have on Facebook that's got tens of thousands of people in it. And the amount of people that are just so confused and need good quality help has never been at such a high. There's an all-time high for demand, and there's an all-time low for enthusiastic, good quality brokers right now.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for this or saying this, but maybe the barrier of entry to be an agent needs to be a little bit tougher, right? I mean, I hate to say that, but even areas like Colorado has the most brutal like certification for their private exchange on ACA. It is brutal, like 12 hours, brutal. But you find that a lot of the fraudsters and the people who do, guess what? They don't sell in Colorado very much because it's really, there's a hard barrier of entry there.
Even here in Utah, we're critical of one carrier, but like Select Health, that's 90% of the market share here. They do a lot better job of rooting out fraudulent activity and having good quality policies here on our local in Utah.
You know, it's like, hey, maybe, you know, like when you get to be a senior citizen and you have to go back and, you know, test and prove to keep your license, you know, it's kind of like, do we need something like that for insurance agents where, you know, and look, it's happened to us before where you have an agent who's failed AHIP multiple times or carrier certifications multiple times. And you go, you know, have you ever considered that maybe this just isn't the career path for you? Yeah. If you're failing these things so many times, like you're probably not going to be a very good agent.
Well, and we've seen, and we brought over agents from other entities, and that their org or their upline or their FMO cheated their way through AHIP or the FFM certs or just gave them all the answers. And it's like, no, guess what? You actually have to know these things. You actually have to know how these products work and what you're doing. You can't just cheat your way through school and then show up and think that you're going to do well in that career.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what we've had. Well, to kind of bring it all home, I mean, I think that, you know, it is tough out there. Like I said, it's the wasteland. There's still opportunity. It is really pretty ugly. And like I said, I think we're messaging out to you all that, there is still more rough turbulence ahead, but that's not to say that you can't win. And I'm trying to tell all you agents too, like, hey, if there's ever been a time for you to follow the rules and to be compliant, now is the time more than ever. Do not cut corners. Don't give anybody any reason to not want to do business with you.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Yeah, Mosiah, maybe we can find a reference, but I'm trying to think of these Wasteland movies or these apocalyptics where the group of good guys is doing well and thriving. You know, like there's like Rick's group with The Walking Dead, or the only guy I can think of is in Mad Max, the guy that has like the mask on that like he can't take it off. Maybe you can AI make me that guy. But they're bad guys.
But those are bad guys.
They control the resource. So we're like those guys, but the good guys. You know?
Did they do good in Waterworld?
Well, yeah, there's the good guys are always like, they don't have a big setup, right? They're always the resistance.
They're always the ones that suffer.
Exactly.
It's kind of that way. A lot of the good guys are suffering right now.
We're gonna make it through. We are still optimistic. It's just going to get, you know, who you're with is more important now than it's ever been, like we always say. And we would love to, you know, have good productive conversations, and hopefully we can all get back on the same page as an industry.
Yep. All right, man. Catch you next week.